That's right.
Yeah. This time around, though,
Let's quickly go over the default KotH round, because I think it's an important bit of pre-knowledge required to understand how most King of the Hill rounds end. Generally, the team that wins the first team fight wins the entire map. Obviously, right, the better team wins the first team fight, so the better team will win the round. But it's also because of the game's length. Generally, King of the Hill rounds look a little like this. First, Team A wins the first team fight without using any ultimates. Second, Team B comes and they retake with their ultimates. Either Team A manages to defend, at which point the game is going to be most likely over 100-0, or Team B wins, at which point they're going to take the point after getting stalled to probably 99-0. 3, Team A uses their ultimates, and either they win, because Team B already used their ultimates last fight, at which point the game is going to be over 100 to around 40-60, depending on how long it took Team A to retake, or Team B wins despite them having a ult disadvantage, at which point Team A can just regroup again because they have time for 2 pushes until Team B gets to 100%. And then number 4, Team A gets another chance to retake, and in this case, whichever team wins the overtime fight wins the round, and the game in this case would usually end 100-99. Obviously, not every single King of the Hill round goes like this. Sometimes the teams don't get into 80+ capture territory after their first take, but usually there are 3 captures. The initial capture, the retake capture, and then a final retake capture that wins the game or leads to an overtime game.
LNL, they're going to be running Fried instead of Nex, who they were.
Both teams are running Sombra, so taking cage control is pretty important, but there are some slight differences in both comps. Legion is running a Soldier without a Mercy. I think there's an argument to be made to replace the Zenyatta with a Mercy that would allow them to match LNL's tank trades with Moira heals, while also getting more value out of Soldier. Res is also good, and Mercy is much less vulnerable to an EMP than a Zenyatta. Mercy next to a Soldier also needs less peeling than a Zenyatta, and considering that Legion aren't running a Tracer, Zenyatta isn't super necessary for his Harmony Orb either. So I think they can definitely experiment with running Lucio Mercy on maps where they plan on picking Soldier. Legion's overall strategy is to take control of the high ground while taking point control with their frontline. LNL, on the other hand, doesn't have any high ground presence, but they did decide to go for a Moira pick. Moira on Riot House is pretty good if you fight around the point, garbage if you don't. Considering that they didn't pick Zen despite them picking Tracer implies that they were aware of Legion's strat. Ideally, LNL wants to abuse the Moira as much as possible and just take point control. The Soldier doesn't have clear LOS onto the entire point, so fighting around the point could potentially hurt Legion's Soldier or force him off the high ground. Since Legion was running a Soldier, taking the initial engagement on the point is risky, which is why they probably decided to go for a teamfight around Cage. The optimal play, in my opinion, would be doing the following. They would start setting up around Cage, and that's where they fight too. At the start of the fight, the Tracer plays with their team and applies frontline pressure to win tank trades and take control of Cage. Once the point opens or Legion tries to rotate point, LNL needs to immediately rotate and make sure that they take point control away. Since Legion are running a Soldier, they really don't want to have him on the point. They want him to either play stairs or high ground.
Running in that spot last week, we have Sombra's out for...
Legion decides to immediately set up their Soldier on the high ground. This means that Tracer can't play around the center of the map anymore, as she would be in his line of sight. She either takes control of Cage with the rest of the team, or ideally takes control of the point. In my opinion, rotating to point would have been the smartest move here. Taking control of Cage is worthless, as they would have to eventually rotate away from Cage anyways. Getting on point would cause problems with Soldier's LOS, either making him much less effective or forcing him off the high ground. Once the Soldier is off the high ground, LNL wouldn't have to force an engagement. They could simply LOS for the most part and let Moira heal up all of the damage coming in. At that point, Legion would be forced to take an engagement on the point, and that would 100% favor LNL in terms of comp. Not being on the high ground, Legion's backline would also be very exposed and open to a dive in case LNL could find an opportunity, for example waiting for Legion to push into the point and then counter-diving them.
Both sides, I wasn't able to quite see who got that hack off though.
Early hack coming out here, Reach moving forward, and Reach is going to be thrown back, so we do have the Sombra v Sombra setup. And LNL, they just have to decide how do they challenge this here in the situation. Meanwhile, Panker catches...
Legion is rotating much faster, however. They realize that their Soldier managed to get on high ground safely and that LNL hasn't rushed to point, so their tanks just rotate, using Soldier's pressure to get onto the point safely. At this point, LNL is already screwed, to be honest. Without using cooldowns, them rotating to point now would end up with them taking a bunch of damage that would cost them the fight. If they used cooldowns to get onto the point, they would have that as a disadvantage and lose. The only solution to this is to rotate to point immediately before Legion can set up. Crossing from cage to point once the soldier has taken high ground is ridiculously difficult. I hope that this image helps visualize the problems of Legion taking point control first with the soldier on the high ground.
Reach out, gonna be forcing him to translocate out of the fight. And look, you see the tank dominance. Oh, Kevster hacked in the back. Tracer, where you gonna go? You're going nowhere. Meanwhile, the Legion, it's just simple. They outposition, they get people on the point first, they get the early progress, and what do? You leave.
At this point, Legion really just has to clean up. But one thing to note is that Legion Soldier did decide to drop from the high ground once LNL's tanks rotated to the point. This confirms my assumptions earlier that if LNL takes point control first, Legion Soldier wouldn't hesitate giving up high ground for a clearer LOS, making him more vulnerable to a counter dive. To summarize, here's the overall space distribution of both teams immediately after LNL rotated. Red is Legion's space and blue is LNL's. This is dive comp. Legion didn't jump a single target, they just used smart positioning and their WASD keys to take 80% of the space available on the map. At this point, it becomes almost impossible for LNL to retake.
LNL struggling to get back in. Your Diva's gonna get demaxed, no one's looking at Corey, and it's an easy take here for the Legion.
Yeah, Gladiators just played that perfectly. It was the bait and switch, right? You have KotH.
Right here, we can see Legion's setup. This is actually ridiculously good. Soldier is on his way to set up on the high ground he was on previously. This is Legion's setup from a top-down perspective, and it beautifully shows how well prepared they were. Red once again represents the space Legion controls, and blue represents Soldier's line of sight. After winning the initial retake, thanks to their super quick rotate, they set themselves up in the absolute perfect way, honestly. Knowing that they are running a Soldier, they know that rotating to cage is impossible for LNL. LNL is still running Moira, so the only way that they can take the point here is by directly going to the point. That way, they are exposed to the Soldier for as short a time as possible while they are crossing, while also forcing a fight on the point as described earlier, forcing Legion Soldier out of position and abusing Moira while fighting on the close point. Cooldowns are ridiculously important in dive, and Legion's setup is built in a way to maximize cooldowns. Winston and Diva have set themselves up right above the door they know that LNL has to leave out of. If LNL doesn't leave out of the door, then they are going to lose the fight anyways, so this is LNL's only chance. So by setting themselves up right above that door, they can drop down on LNL as they are crossing without having to use any of their cooldowns. This is super good for them, and being able to drop also means that they get some free damage in before LNL can do anything, as they are going to be fighting at Soldier's LOS.
Trying to get in, try and challenge and poke down those tanks, but Blase is just waiting that entire time with that Sombra for the hack. Once your Tracer goes down, you are lacking so much damage, especially because your other DPS is reach on the Sombra. And so with that, Gladiators Legion holding on to it already, 16% secured for them now as they push forward.
And that's exactly what happens. LNL make the smart move of rushing onto point, but the initial setup from Legion was too good.
Blase was detected for just a second, but he's now trying to get the hack off. Did he get it onto the Winston? No, he did.
As LNL rotates, they eventually end up losing their Diva mech. This is such an insane amount of value lost that at this point there's really no point in further looking at it. The best thing that LNL could have done here is wait a bit longer so they can farm up Moira's Coalescence, and then use that to safely rotate onto the point.
Did not, but still, it doesn't matter. They got the D-Mech. Gods takes out Fried.
It's a really rough engage from LNL there, where they kind of went in one by one. They gave a Legion a really nice setup. Dummy's gonna find himself taking the trip into the brink. And LNL, they're going to hit the issue that many teams face when they go in the Legion, is that how to get good engage. And the answer is, well, you have to make sure that you outmaneuver your Pankers and Gods of the world.
And this is gonna be so difficult for LNL because Reach.
After this teamfight, Legion goes for the exact same setup. There's really no reason to go for something different. It's strong, it works, that's it.
Hasn't been able to get the damage off. Remember, this is the new Sombra. She does not.
LNL has a different approach this time. They tried crossing straight onto point previously, but rushing through Soldier's LOS and giving their tanks a free drop on them isn't going to work. So despite them running the Moira, they decide to rotate Cage and take out the Soldier first, after which they will take the point instead of forcing a fight on the point. The main problem with this engage is that the value of the Moira is going to be severely limited. Even with her ultimate, it's going to be hard for her to keep line of sight with the rest of her team. This approach has the added advantage of turning Legion's plan against them. Legion's tanks wanted to position themselves in a way where they wouldn't have to use their mobility in order to engage. With LNL rotating Cage, this doesn't work anymore, as they are forced to use their jump to peel for the Soldier.
Get EMP charge off of hacked health packs, so he's only at 75% now.
LNL's Tracer went high ground, so she could get a clean jump on the Soldier, and LNL's front line jumps Legion's high ground after rotating through Cage, while Legion's Winston quickly leaps over before LNL even arrives. This was a really quick reaction, which is good.
Rolf is going to be free to do whatever he wants. Postmon comes out, but it got eaten.
LNL's Tracer, however, is forced to help out his Sombra. She got hacked, which means that at this point, she is an incredibly free pick for Legion. This is also where the part at the start of this analysis comes in handy. Legion is at a point now where they have pretty much all ults, and defensive ults always trump offensive ults. This means that LNL really can't dive Legion due to them just burning support ults and kiting. LNL's Sombra really shouldn't have rushed through main. She should have followed the tanks through Cage and play around that area so that she can't get punished as easily by Legion without them running towards the opposite part of the map. By not losing Sombra and keeping a 6v6, they could have kited the Transcendence, used their own ults to force out a sound barrier, and then EMP that away in hopes of turning the fight around. But considering Legion's setup, that just isn't really possible. The best choice here would have been to wait a bit longer and commit to a fight with full ults. Wait a little bit longer so that LNL gets Lucio and Sombra ult, take control of Cage, and play around D.Va ult. D.Va's ult here is the most consistent way of creating space for LNL, and Zenyatta's Transcendence doesn't really help anyone but himself. That way, they could rotate onto point safely, and then use Coalescence during the Transcendence to stay alive. Once Legion drops down from the high ground, LNL would use their own EMP to prevent Legion from using Beat or EMP. This gives them a short window of opportunity to burn someone down. So in short, use D.Va Bomb to force Legion out of position, Coalescence to take space, and then EMP to actually kill them. Instead, they went for a full dive onto Legion, lost a bunch of time because he just transed, and lost their Sombra because she wasn't quite sure what to do, especially considering she was so close to her ult. Lucio didn't have Beat, which means that there was no real way of saving the Tracer either, although even if he had Beat, it would most likely get EMP'd away.
It was Eden in the moment. Kevster overcommitted, made that very telegraphed. Reach loses the Sombra v Sombra in the back. And Legion, look at the power they have ult-wise here, and they don't necessarily even have to invest much into it. Pook's under pressure, gonna be able to shake it. Blasé still holding on to the EMP. But LNL has lost this fight so convincingly, they're not even making the Legion pull out their pocketbook right now.
Yeah, it was just the Transcendence and ultimately the self-destruct used by Gods just to get himself back into mech. But now we're coming down to what could be the last fight for LNL here on the points. Reach struggling to...
This is LNL's last fight, and thanks to them dry fighting last time and getting Transcendence out, they can win this fight if they EMP first. It's pretty much their win condition. Legion uses the same setup as before.
Get that EMP, will have it for this fight, but he's got to plan it perfectly. He's got to use it as soon as Pooks uses that sound barrier.
LNL, last opportunity here.
LNL's Sombra probably felt incredibly pressured to touch point here. At least that's the only reason I can see on why she would play at that spot. Maybe her plan was to let the Tracer touch the point, Legion rotates, and she can EMP from the center of the map. It's probably more likely. She isn't using any cover, however, which ends up hurting her a lot, forcing her to translocate out. And most importantly, Legion managed to get their EMP out first.
Reach, oh, almost gets...
Legion's Soldier rotating onto the point was necessary. Considering that Legion was doing tank trades as follow-up for an EMP, he probably thought he could at least contest the point for a little while before the rest of his team follows. And since they aren't running a Tracer and he knows the Sombra is near Cage, he is really the only one that can contest here.
Drilled down Corey, very close. Meanwhile, KotH was focused out, got hacked and disabled by Gods. Corey's just...
By the time LNL gets their EMP off, it really doesn't matter anymore. With them losing their main tank, there isn't a lot they can do. It's good that they got their beat off after Legion EMP'd, but LNL just doesn't have the ultimates to retake here. Even if they would, Legion would have at least 2 opportunities to retake anyways. I think they just got caught off guard by the EMP because it was relatively far forward, so it's hard to say where they exactly wanted to go.
Disengage a little bit, gets hacked, but he has an escape route. There's the barrier coming out for Legion. Pooks was hiding the entire time.
Legion's monkey got to drop their bubble, LNL doesn't have a Winston. That's 600 raw value for Legion. At this point, LNL losing the fight is completely out of their control. It's impossible for them to deal enough damage. They'll all be dead by the time the Winston barrier is down. So to conclude, Legion was playing Soldier Dive very well and abused the map perfectly. LNL had some nice on-the-spot strategies that sadly weren't good enough, and Corey's aim looks like someone having a seizure. I hope that this could somewhat explain KotH dynamics per teamfight and how to generate, take, and control space with Dive. This is a great example on how to play dive from both teams without even having one true hard dive, except the dive onto Legion Zenyatta, who just ended up transing anyways. But that was more of a soft dive, really, to bait out ultimates. Had LNL rotated a bit faster in the first fight, or had they attempted a different approach for the retake using their ultimates, they could have 100% won this. It's really not up for a discussion that Legion was the better team here, but I really liked the way LNL was aware of the problem and Legion's strategy, and how they were trying to come up with ways on how to deal with it.